All right, so I'm not going to lie. The Puppet Warp tool, it's a little bit weird. It's cool, but it's a little bit weird. So if you're watching this, and as you see me do things, and you're wondering, I'm not quite sure I'm going to use this every day. You're probably not going to use it every day, but as you can see here, we'll go over a couple of different examples where you can employ the new Puppet Warp tool. All right, so I've got the puppetwarp.psd file open, and one of the things about Puppet Warp is that if you start with a selection, it usually gives you better results. Okay, so in the last lesson, we talked about how to select this gentleman when we talked about the quick selection and refine edges. I've already made a selection of them, so all you got to do is go to select, go to load selection, and just choose alpha 1 there and click OK. So it loads a selection of that gentleman, and then we're going to press Command or Control J, and that's just going to pop it up onto its own layer. Okay, so you can see what we're working with over here. All right, so let's come up here to the Puppet Warp tool. It goes under the Edit menu down to Puppet Warp, and in the way the tool works, there's a lot of different aspects of it. The way that it works is, let's say I pop a pin. I say pop, I drop a pin by clicking right there. All right. And it works with these little pins. These are hinge points. All right. If I just put the pin there and I click and I start to drag, it's like he's floating. Okay. So it's just moving the entire object that I had selected. It's not until I drop a second pin somewhere that now I can start to manipulate these hinge points. So if I click on this one, it's almost like I'm rotating him around. Okay, because it's keeping a hinge point here and it's rotating things around. In fact, that you'll see right up here under this little rotate section, you'll see, 16 degrees. So if I come in here and type 45, you can see he rotates even more. If I come up in here and type 90, it goes even further. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the escape key to get out of that because it's just getting bad. But you can see that just by having 2 points, we can start to actually do something. So let's come back in here to Puppet Warp, and I'm going to drop a point right here. I'm going to drop a point on his head, maybe even one. Let's go over here to his torso. We'll drop a couple points over here, one down on his feet. So what I'm doing, and the way that this works, is essentially you're locking things down. Okay, you're locking areas down that you don't want to move by adding these points, and they also serve as hinge points in case I do want to move them specifically later. So now that I've put a point in the middle here, if I click and I drag, you can see it's keeping it locked down in these two areas, and it's just allowing me to kind of to point his knees out a little bit. Okay, so let's just pretend, art director looks at this and says, you know what, I kind of like it. It's dancer guy, he's cool, but it's not dramatic enough. I really want to see him bend. Okay. Well, I can click on this point and we can just click and drag him back a little bit more. All right. Notice his hands are going with me. If I had dropped a point down here, that's where we wouldn't want it. That's where too many points can be a problem because now it's kind of getting weird. It's hinging here and it's distorting, and that's not what we want. So if I do put a point down I don't want, I just hit the delete key and it gets rid of it. So we're just going to click here and we're just going to drag that downward. Okay. And so now we're getting more of a bend here. And then I can click on the one on his chest, and I can drag that downward a little bit, maybe even click on his torso and just kind of push that out a little bit. All right, and we can start to get some pretty neat effects here. Now, if I were to go really crazy with this and I were to click and I were to drag, you'll notice that, see his hand start to go, his hand actually starts going behind his leg. All right, that has to do with where you put your points and in what order that you put your points, because there's a depth. Remember, I added this point before I added the points down here under his legs. All right. So if I wanted to change this, I wanted his hand to appear above his leg, which I really don't. But let's say I did. I could come over here to pin depth and I can click up, and you'll see that it changes the depth of that pin and it starts moving it above the others. So now his hand appears there, but we kind of like it below. So we're going to drop our pin depth below there and leave it. A couple other settings here. So we have density, which we're going to take a look in the next video because I've got another example for Puppet Warp for you. We're going to take a look at that in the next video. Let me go ahead and undo a couple of times here. And let's drag him back up to where it looks somewhat believable and not quite where I had it before. And there is one other option over here called mode. And so check out what mode does. The easiest way is I've already made a change. Normal is basically the default. Rigid, watch what rigid does. All right, see how it kind of kicks the points out a little bit. It keeps it keeps a little bit of the fluidity, the fluidness. I'm not quite sure what fluidity and fluidness is, but it kind of keeps those a little bit more rigid rather than having the normal option, which kind of lets me bend things a little bit more. All right. And then the other option here, which is distort, is just flat out weird. All right. Just does funny things to his hair and stuff like that. So most of the time I'm going to keep it on normal, but at least you can kind of click here and you can see the difference. And the cool thing about it is you don't have to make the decision ahead of time. You can make a change and then come over here under mode and you can experiment with the different modes to see what they look like. Okay. So I'm going to hit enter or return. And that commits my warping. All right. So now if I hide that, you can see the gentleman's just kind of just bent back a little bit. That was the original. And then we've just bent him back a little bit. You could do some cool things with this too. So, if I wanted to, we could make a selection and go in here and replace the background and things like that. But for a special effect, you can just reduce the opacity. All right. And then maybe duplicate that layer, Command or Control J, go into free transform. And then rotate it back a little bit. Hit enter or return. Duplicate again. Go into free transform again. Rotate it back some more. All right. And you're almost getting the appearance as if you're getting the movement kind of aspect here. All right. Just by having the reduced opacity. Again, it's just a special effect. But there's some neat things that you can do with it. If you're looking at it and you're saying, I'm not quite sure I'm going to use it every day, you're probably not. But just kind of know it's there and that you can get in here and manipulate it. We're going to look in the next lesson at how you can use this for retouching though, and that opens up a whole new realm of possibilities for it.